This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Stevenson with his own moves. Carrington. North are in front.
Well, we made it. We have made it to the bye. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to pick up another win on our way to the bye, but we've made it to that week off. Hopefully we can take a little recovery now and launch into about 10 or so straight wins after the bye. Welcome back to North Pod after just another one of those honourable losses, this time to the Western Bulldogs. If you didn't catch that score, it was 84 North Melbourne to 105 the Dogs, so a 21-point loss. And yeah, I thought we looked pretty good in patches, but we were just unable to take advantage of that good play that we had. It was another one of those games where we kind of faded at the end of quarters a little bit, and there's a couple of times where we let the Dogs get a run on and score a few on the trot, and that really put us out of it. But we weren't really out of the game until early in the last quarter. And even then we sort of kicked a couple and kept in touch late. We never really looked like it after we went sort of down by 5.5 goals in the last quarter, obviously. But to be at that point, we were competitive. And I think really against the Western Bulldogs, who have had our measure easily over the last couple of years, it was good to, only lose by 21, be competitive, honourable loss. We're all over honourable losses, but at the same time, I think we'd prefer honourable losses to the beltings that we've had over the past couple of years. So, a decent game. I thought in terms of the story of the game, it was just our sloppiness, really, and our lack of finishing touch that cost us, particularly around contested ball. We, were more or less level with them. I think they, towards the very end, pushed away in terms of contested ball and ended up winning it by sort of 13 or 14, I think. But, throughout the game, I thought we, at least were able to draw level with them around the contest. But their pressure just meant that we, our possessions didn't amount to much. Often they were pushing us backwards or sideways. They thoroughly out-tackled us, which was a big part of why we weren't able to be effective with our disposal through the middle. And it's fair enough. They've got some big bodies. Obviously, Bontempelli's the easy one to point to, but they've got maturity through there with McKay and Liberatore, and obviously Tim English is one of, if not the best ruckman in the competition now. Bailey Dale off halfback was fantastic. So, they've got some really mature big bodies in the midfield that, for the most part, were a relatively young midfield. Obviously, Greenwood and Simpkin were back, so we had a bit through there, and Shields sort of goes through there too. But it was, you could really see the difference between, I guess, just the maturity of the midfield and the stronger and taller bodies. Really, their pressure and tackling was just too good for us, and we weren't able to, get enough ball forward. So that was the general story of the game, I thought. As I said off the top, absolutely fine that we didn't get the chocolates. I think, I certainly wasn't expecting to win, but it's just another one of those games where you go, if we were 10% better here and 10% better here, the story could have been a lot different. But again, better than losing by 100 points. So before I jump into the negatives and the positives, as I do each week, just a reminder to subscribe to the podcast, give me a rating if you can, and follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all of that good stuff at NorthPod Show. Let's jump right in to the negatives. We know I like to start with the negatives, and this, I guess, kind of links back to what I talked about with story of the game. And that's just that we were too handball happy at times when the Dogs applied that pressure, and we just need to try and get the ball moving forward. Most of the time we were handballing, I shouldn't say most of the time. In terms of those clearances, a lot of the time they were pushing us backwards and sideways. And that's fine if you're handballing backwards or sideways, and that's getting you room to then, give off a good kick. But often in this game, we were handballing backwards or getting pushed backwards, and then we turned it over. Or at least we lost possession, and it was a repeat stoppage. And that's what you really want to avoid. The reason to be going backwards or sideways is to give yourself time and space. So I don't want to be that person. We've all been at the footy, and there's that one person that's just shouting, "Get it on the boot, kick it, stop mucking around with it." Like, we've all been frustrated by that person. So I don't want to be that person, but I do think we overhandballed at times, and we just had to get it on the boot. They were out pressuring us and corralling us and kind of forcing us into those decisions, and you can't always get on the boot. Obviously, there are times where you've got to give the hands off, but we did overhandball it, I think, and I think that a lot of that was due to the Dogs' pressure. I do think that we've got a couple of players that prefer to handball. Like, Phillips is definitely a handball first player at the moment, and that's okay to have one or two of them. But we've also got to have those players that are going to take on the kick. Wardlaw's also been a bit handball heavy. He was pretty quiet today, but yeah, just too handball happy. We kind of let the Dogs pressure us too much, and that's why we weren't able to be effective around the contest, which leads me into the second negative, which was the inside 50 count. We lost 36-72. So I feel like that's a big indication of how the game went, and that really was a result of, what I just talked about in terms of the Dogs' pressure. You're not going to win many games, if any, when you're losing the inside 50 count by 36. We're pretty fortunate that the Dogs were inaccurate early on, because the damage could have happened a lot earlier. Taking that lead into quarter time, a lot of that was due to the Dogs not kicking straight early on, because they certainly had their chances. And for 72 inside 50s, I thought our defence held up pretty well when the ball was coming in slow. I don't think it's an individual player that let us down today. I think it was the classic, when the ball was coming in fast or they were moving it quickly through the midfield, the Dogs, that is, we looked vulnerable. On the lead, the Dogs were far better. Ugle-Hagan early in the game was really good on the lead, or sort of taking the ball at the top of the highest point. Obviously, Weightman, who I'll talk about next, was good on the lead. If the Dogs are getting inside 50, 72 times, they get a score. So, yeah, just we had a relatively even share of the possession, but we weren't able to move the ball forward as well as the Dogs were. And yeah, if you're not getting inside 50, you're not giving the forwards a chance. There was certainly periods of the game where it just lived in the Dogs' half of the ground, and it was those repeat inside 50s. We weren't able to get it out of our defence. So yeah, that was frustrating, and you could see sort of our defence really trying to weigh up. Do I try and bite off this sort of 50-50 kick that will result in us being able to, cut up the ground, or do I just kick long again? And inevitably, there was a lot of long kicks that Tim English was marking and sending back, unfortunately. The third negative, and we expected this, I think, but Cody Weightman killed us. Kicked 6 goals, 2, had 13 touches, 7 marks, couple of tackles, sat on Griffin Logue's head for a Mark of the Year contender, unfortunately. And he was just too good in space. He got a couple on the lead where the kicking player got it nice down low, impossible for the defender to get it. So you just got to cop those, but he was a long way out in front of his defender. And then, a couple that he got from crumbing or, from the disorganisation of the defence. But we just did have a player who could stop him, unfortunately. And, we went into the game knowing that he was going to be the sort of player that we can't defend. There was that game, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, where he kicked 4 on us in a quarter. He regularly towels us up. McDonald and Zeeble played most of the time on him. Logue did a little bit early. It just depended how many tools were down in the forward line for the Dogs as to who was on him. But it looked like Zeeble actually was the preferred option at times. And McDonald, obviously, a fair bit too. Was generally a Logue or a Core if, that the Dogs only had two of their tools forward. But none of them had an answer for him. I thought Logue was probably the best chance, but, Logue was the one who Weightman sat at his head. It was just, we really had to put a body on him before he got to that capacity to launch at the ball. Because I think I'd be happy if he's kicking a couple because he's getting out in the lead and marking it down low. Like, there's not a lot you can do about that, but you can't allow him to get a run and jump at the ball like he did at that opportunity where he sat on Logue's head. He was deadly. He just looked dangerous every time he went near it. I was having flashbacks to sort of early 2010 kind of era when Lance Franklin was sort of at the peak of his powers at Hawthorn, and just every time he went near the ball, Hawthorn fans were sort of shouting or screaming Buddy. And I hated it as a North fan. And that's what it felt like today. There was just so many Dogs supporters shouting Cody anytime he went near it because you just felt like he was a chance. Yeah, it was tough. McDonald is usually not too bad at those kind of crafty smalls, but he's not quick enough to go with someone like Weightman, or agile enough, sort of doesn't have the acceleration to stay with him. So, yeah, I think that's something that we need to look into, is like a genuine small lockdown defender, similar to the fact that we need that genuine small forward who applies pressure. It's kind of like we need one of those, they're sort of a pair almost, those two. It's something that maybe a Bergman can do. I just don't know that he's ever going to be agile enough to go with someone like Cody Weightman. Obviously, McDonald's great for a medium or a small, but if he can't play on those really quick ones, I'm not sure what the alternative is at the moment. Maybe that's going to be a Blake Drury in the future if he ends up back in defence where he played to start off the year. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I do know that we lack anyone who could play on someone like him. Charlie Cameron is that another one of those sorts of players. So, yeah, McDonald played really well against Papley, but Papley is not quite as quick. McDonald also played relatively well on Toby Green, and again, Toby Green not quite as quick. Those two are more crafty players, and I think McDonald can handle them, but he doesn't quite have the pace to go with that quicker player. The next thing was we weren't able to capitalise. We just made a few of those really North Melbourne silly mistakes that have plagued us over the last couple of years. I guess to give some context, like Liam Jones was subbed out during the first quarter. It looks like Paul Curtis might have broken his leg. Broken his arm by kicking it. So Liam Jones was out early, and then O'Brien left. I don't know if it was late in the second or early in the third, but they were down two of their tall backs. Norton went back to compensate in that second half, and he looked shaky at times, like not horrible, but certainly more vulnerable than Liam Jones would have. And we just weren't able to capitalise. Like I mentioned earlier, we didn't get enough ball in there. We lost the inside 50s by a million. Because when we were able to get in there, we were quite efficient. 53% efficiency inside 50, which is high, and high for us this year. Too often it was just a couple of silly mistakes when we're entering 50. The two that happen relatively close to each other, Stevo is running down the wing, takes a couple of bounces, and you can see that he is trying to do the right thing. He's slowing down. He's thinking about a centering ball. He's not just going to kick it long, and then kicks this spearing ball that should have hit. I reckon it was Paul Curtis. I can't remember, but there was a player or two in the middle, but he missed him. And that ended up going up the other end pretty quickly. So, that should have been a goal. Wasn't. Not long after that, Zurhar's in a similar kind of position. He's got it off the half 40s, about 80 out, and he just runs and runs and runs, and then runs too far because he's also hit an inside centering ball that actually did hit Phoenix Spicer, but he'd given away a free kick for running too far. So, those two were those classic, like, we've done all the hard work. The players are trying to do the right thing. It's not as if they've blazed away, but, skill errors. Zurhar's run too far and Stevo just missed the kick. It's those sorts of things that really cost us, particularly because we'd worked so hard to get opportunities like that. Anyway, I said, like, I guess you'd prefer to turn it over there than turn it over at off half back. We have done less of that in recent times, so not none of it, but less of it. But yeah, I mean, they're just so costly when you feel like you're certain to score, and that's what ends up happening. And the last negative, just game on the line. Marcus Bontempelli was too good. I know I talked about Weightman before. He was particularly good, sort of in that quarter two, quarter three. Bontempelli, I won't say he was quiet up till three-quarter time, but he wasn't immense. But he had a big last quarter, and just made those young mids of ours look really, really small and not as strong, which is obviously the case. I mean, he's sort of in the 190s and playing on players that are in the 180s. He kicked 3 goals, 1 from 32 touches, 6 marks, 11 tackles. He kicked 2 late goals, just buried us, and just stood up when he was being tackled all day. Was often being spun and managed to get a handball away to a teammate. Phillips often found himself on him, and I think probably Phillips is better matched up against an Adam Treloar or a Libba, for us at least, against those kind of smaller mids. Even though he's more of an inside mid like Bontempelli can be. I mean, Bont's an inside-outside mid, to be fair. But yeah, I mean, Bontempelli just looked like a man, and we looked like children in there sometimes around the contest. And yeah, I mean, he was too good. When it looked like we were making a run at it, he kicked a couple of goals. He took a good strong mark against Phillips inside 50, broke away from clearances a couple of times, and we just weren't able to tackle him or corral him in a strong enough way to impact his disposal. So yeah, I mean, the Bont was really good, unfortunately for us. So I think that covers all of the negatives that I had. I mean, obviously the only other negative is that we lost. So we'll move on to the goods. There are plenty of good things to say, so it's not all bad news. I think thing one, from limited supply, I thought our 3 best forwards were good. Larkey, Zurharr, and Stevo were all good. A little bit patchy, but good. I mean, Larkey was very quiet in the first half. I think he just had the 1 point for the first half, and I'd wondered whether he was going to have one of those games where he just struggled for impact. But he did really well in the second half, kicked 3 goals, 1 for the end, had 11 touches, took 3 contested marks. So it was good to see him contested marking, particularly when, generally speaking, he had the only, I guess, of note defender for the Dogs, given they'd lost there too. So Keith spent most of the time on Larkey, and he took a couple of really good grabs on him. He also gave 1 goal away to Stevo late, so he could have had 4 Larkey. So yeah, it was a good second half in particular from Nick, and I thought he took advantage of the opportunities that he got. He was very opportunistic, which is what we need from him. So he's kicked another 3, kept himself in the running for that Coleman medal, gone into the bye with some goal kicking form, which is good. Stevo, similarly, he also kicked 3, had 13 touches, and I thought, aside from a dropped mark on the wing, was pretty faultless. And obviously that kick that I talked about before, where he wasn't able to hit the target inside 50. But it was a good game overall for Stevo. Similarly opportunistic, and I mean, yeah, just continued that season long form that he's had. He's been really good this season. So yeah, another good game from Stevo. And Cam, he did kick a goal late, so wasn't as particularly effective as the others possibly, but 14 touches, 5 marks, 3 of them contested, had 3 tackles. Just had one of those games where he was impactful and went hard at it every time. The sort of game where, he's not having a belter, but he was still impacting it. And I think that's the sort of game that we want to see from Zurharr, where if he's not able to kick 4 or 5, he's still able to maybe chip in for 1 and get others involved. And I thought he did that today. I didn't think it was one of his bad games where he wasn't able to impact it. Those contested marks were important. He had a couple of really good kicks. It certainly wasn't a perfect game, but I thought the 3 of them were great given the lack of opportunities that they had. Obviously, Curtis was impactful, had a low possession game. He also kicked one, and he had a couple of good score involvements, I thought, but he was a bit more on the quiet side, just a low possession, high impact game. Coleman Jones tried hard, took a couple of marks, not as impactful as the others, but I've said before, I just want him to get it. I want him to get a game every week. I'm not super worried if he's kicking it bag or not. I just, we've got to keep developing him. And he was okay. I thought for the second half playing on Norton, he outmarked him once or twice. Yeah, he was fine. I would say certainly not a good game, but not in my bottom lot of players. The next positive, it was a good McKay game. So we'll put this in the pile of we want McKay to stay because he had a really good intercepting game. Sure, he got beaten on the lead a couple of times, and that's fair enough. That's not his strength. He doesn't have great closing speed. He does need, if the opposition players kicked it correctly to the forward, generally speaking, McKay is going to find it difficult. But if it's a 50-50 or, not a great kick, McKay was great. He had a bad turnover kicking it centrally. But in fairness to him, he was, that was the time where we kind of need to be taking the game on. So I get it. I'm not sure how Caleb Daniel shouldn't be taking any intercept marks, to be fair. He's the shortest player on the field. But, that aside, I thought McKay had a good game. Had 19 disposals, 11 marks, 3 of them contested, 11 intercept possessions. He just read it really well in the air, and there's a couple of times where I thought he was out of position, as a result of the kick, because it had been kicked to the Dogs player's advantage, and he just found a way to spoil it kind of to himself and take a 2-grab contested mark. There's a couple of times that he did that, and a couple of times where he was just that last man in defence taking the mark. I thought, he had a really good game for the most part. We've just got to work on, mitigating those times where he's going to get beaten in the lead because, we want players to play to their strengths, and obviously we want the team to compensate for their teammates' weaknesses. So if we know McKay is going to get beaten in the lead, we just need to make sure that we're aware of blocks being put on him, and we're kind of coming across in front of players. He's leading opposition player, I guess. So these things come with time. I think when you look at that game and you think about if we took him out of the side in terms of him leaving at the end of the year, that defence is looking real shaky. Having Core come in, I thought made sense given how tall the Dogs are, and I thought that worked relatively well for this game, but generally speaking, we don't want to be playing the 3 talls, and if it's just Core and Logue going forward, I'm not too sure how I feel about that. So definitely a McKay to stay game, this one. Next thing, Hugh Greenwood showed that he can be a dangerous forward, which is what we need from our mids. I think my worry with our stockpile of mids is that not enough of them are able to be dangerous or, put in other positions on the ground. And I thought Greenwood kind of showed that, he can go forward and kick goals, kick 2 in the first quarter. And I think his height obviously is great. He's able to take some marks, and he's so strong that he's hard to tackle. I guess it'll be interesting to see if he does have enough goal sense because he got one for a free kick and one for a mark. I don't know if I can see him crumbing or being part of a chain of possessions that ends up in a goal. But all we needed from him was to be a bit dangerous going forward, and he was that today, which was good. And similarly, Powell, who we've sort of been a bit concerned about whether or not he can play forward or, whether we were misusing him in playing him forward. He kicked 2 goals late, both of them snaps around the corner, so he showed a bit, which is, we just need to see what those mids can do if they're not in the middle, because we do have a lot of them, and you want to be able to say, put someone at half back or at half forward or on a wing when they're not in the middle. You don't want to have to put them straight on the bench. So it was good to see those two being a bit more flexible. It's kind of what I certainly thought going into the year that Cunnington might be able to play that role and play sometime forward and sometime in the middle, but it's one of those things where you don't know if it actually is going to work until it happens. Like in theory, I think Cunnington's a great forward line player, but maybe if he's actually playing there most of the time, he's pretty easy to figure out. So, yeah, I mean, Greenwood was good. Powell looked good in that last quarter. It's good to see, some flexibility from our team there. Sheasel, I mean, I feel bad for the bloke. I think he's going under the radar. He was really good again. I think at this point, we're just taking him for granted, or the footy world's taking him for granted. He had 32 touches, 5 clearances, 4 inside 50s, led the game for metres gained, had 610 metres gained. He was good again. Obviously, sure, he did have a few of those that were kick-outs, so, make of that what you will, but he had a really good composed game, didn't, to my eye, make any glaring mistakes, was often charged with kicking it long down the line and making it a contest. And yeah, I mean, whatever, this must be our 14th game, I think. So, it's his 14th game of footy, and he just looks like he's been playing off half-back for us for 5 or 6 years at this point. It's just, we can't overestimate how good he's been for us. So, yeah, Sheasel was really good again today. My next positive, I think this is my last proper positive. It's just more of a conundrum with what we do with Taron Thomas. Because Simpkin and Greenwood came back, he played mostly off half-back. Because obviously Simpkin and Greenwood needed to be able to slot into the middle. And he was good off half-back, don't get me wrong. I thought he was probably our cleanest player back there in the contest and looked like he knew what he was doing back there. So I didn't have an issue with him at half-back. I just think he's better in the middle, or at least middle or / forward. So after three-quarter time, when Spicer got subbed out, who, had a bit of a quiet game, Bergman came on. Obviously, that's not a like for a like. So Bergman went to the position that Thomas was playing, and Thomas kind of replaced Spicer in playing a forward / midfield role. And yeah, he made us look so dangerous. It's what we'd been missing for a lot of the game. He had a couple of clearances and was kicking it inside 50, looking dangerous. And I didn't think I'd be saying this, but I really think we do need to be playing him in the middle / off half forward. He's just a more damaging player for us there. And look, to be fair, similar to Harry Sheasel, we'd love, 2 or 3 Taron Thomases in the side. Like, you'd love to be able to put him everywhere. But I think if Sheasel's off half-back, I don't know, I kind of preferred to see Taron Thomas in the middle just because of how good he is in there. Maybe with Davies-Uniacke back after the bye, things might look different, I guess, because we really don't know what the midfield looks like with everyone in there. Given Wardlaw wasn't playing at the start of the year, we haven't had a chance to see what the balance looks like when we're all fit. I suspect someone like Tom Powell might come out if we're all fit, potentially. I mean, maybe just take a player like Spicer out and Powell stays off half forward. I'm not sure. But Thomas, I thought he had 24 touches, but it was a more quiet 24 compared to the impactful, say, 18 or 19 that he's had in his other games where he was also able to hit the scoreboard. So, yeah, I mean, it was a good game by Thomas. It's not a negative. It's just, I don't know where you put him. It's more of a question mark, I guess. Because he is such a good player, we want to use him the best way that the team can use him, I guess. So, yeah, and then my last little positive, we didn't lose by 100. It was, a classic. Going in, I expected to get belted. We probably deserved to lose by a bit more, just based on weight of numbers and sort of the Dogs' inaccuracy. Probably a sort of 30 to 35 point loss would have been a fairer result. But we'll take 21. We didn't lose. We didn't get belted. We were in it till maybe 5 or 10 minutes into that last quarter. So, yeah, all around a good result. We'll take it. We'll just go to Twitter now before I talk quickly about the VFL and the bye next week. I felt, sometimes social media can be just a place where everyone's yelling all these negative things. It's, I guess when you're losing 12 in a row, it's easy to be negative about it. And I felt a bit like I was sitting in Twitter when I was sitting at the ground. There was this bloke next to me, or a couple of seats over, He and his son were sitting there. I said to my partner when I got home, like, I don't know if it's because he was wearing a beret, but I didn't like him at all. And if you're a beret wearer, like, no, absolutely no offense, but this bloke wasn't doing you any favors. He just was so negative about every player the whole game. He was a North fan, and North fans were just making mistake after mistake, if according to him. And even when they weren't making mistakes, they were about to make a mistake, or they shouldn't have kicked it there and they got away with one. Like, he was just. I really find it difficult to ignore fans like that, because I just go like, what are you doing, mate? Like, I get that it's frustrating, but in terms of North Melbourne games, this I wouldn't have put this in, my list of the most frustrating North games from the last 5 years. Like, this was fine, and he was unhappy about everything, and Spicer was copying it, Simpkin was copying it. Like, it was hard. So anyway, I know that's an aside. I'm sorry if you're a beret wearer, but I just think if you want to be that negative, keep it to yourself, because it was a real downer for those sitting around him. Because I thought, on balance, it was a solid game. Nothing. I'm not going home happy, but it was solid. So let's see if Twitter has got some more positivity or not. Billy Wardle or Wordle, sorry Billy, I'm not sure which pronunciation is correct, says 2022 was huge losses, 2023 is honourable losses, 2024 will be more wins. While it's difficult for us to be losing so often, the wins will come very soon. You can feel it in the air. And Billy, I think you're right. You could probably say 2020 through 2022 was huge losses. It was, some pretty bad years in there. But I agree, the last couple of months, you can see we're no longer getting belted every week. Sure, we've had those bad ones like we did against Port or against Melbourne. Like, we haven't... It hasn't been all smooth sailing, but we've been competitive in more matches than not recently, which is good. So I agree, Billy. It's the wins are coming. Rapel looked like boys versus men at the clearances. Bontempelli, Treloar, and Lib are too strong. We've improved, but still some holes. Poor Simpkin had a mare. Hardery tried, the worst result. Larkey is improving overhead and one out. Yeah, I thought you're right. I was sort of touched on the fact that we were out muscled around clearances. Simpkin didn't have a great return game, but you're right, he was trying his heart out and giving his best. And I agree, Larky's contested marking was great today. It's good to see him clunking those, because early in the year, or after the first couple of games, when we had those matches against Brisbane and and the Lions and Carlton, when he was sort of struggling a bit, he was struggling overhead. So it's good to see he's back in some marking form. Chef of Salvation. It gets harder and harder to see the positives when they lose every week. Why is it that the only time North take a scalp, it happens when they have a new coach? Hawthorn embarrassed Brisbane. Why can't North do this to someone? It saddens me. And that is fair, Chef of Salvation. I'm hoping that you might be the Chef of Salvation for the team. I don't know if it's being harder enough. It definitely gets harder to stay positive. I understand that. But I do think we're not far away from taking a scalp like Hawthorn's done a couple of times this year. It'll happen, and I'm really confident that we are going to finish the year with a couple more wins. But some things are going to have to click together. It's going to have to be one of those games where most things go right, and I don't think we've had a game like that probably since the Freo game, when so many things went our way towards the end there. I think that's what it's going to take. Like, we're not a good enough side to win when things aren't going our way. Like, you think about that the Sydney game, when ultimately it was a couple of questionable umpiring decisions and then our own silly mistake in over interchanging, and that meant that we lost the game. Whereas if we're a good side, we're ahead by enough that kind of stuff doesn't really matter. What else do we have here? There's a couple of people like Jeff Donny who say playing with 17 men when Spicer is playing. And look, I thought certainly he didn't have impact with possession today, Spicer. He did take one tackle inside 50 and get a free kick for it and unfortunately miss. He had another mark inside 50 that got taken off him when Zurharr unfortunately ran too far. And beyond that, he mostly really didn't get near it. But we also have to understand that the alternative at the moment is Kane Turner. So, it's just a reflection of where our list is at. Like, we may as well invest some time into Spicer and see if he's going to make it, because the alternative is we play Kane Turner and we know exactly what kind of player he is. He'll kick 5 goals a year. He'll put on some pressure and put some bumps on, and he'll be either adequate or lower. We just don't have the depth to play anyone else in that small forward role at the moment. So, I mean, we did everything we could. We gave him a go. We subbed him out at 3/4 time when it wasn't working for him on the day. And I think that's really all we can do. Might go 2 more. Chris Masiro, I hope I've said that right. Missed LDU, needed one more big boy in the middle. George would have learned a few things today. Saw him working off Bont a bit, though George is still sub 60% game time. So hopefully he has a good rest and fitness program for the break. I agree, when Thomas went into the middle late in the game, you just went, this is kind of what we've been missing. And I guess LDU could have had a similar kind of feel in there for the midfield. So it'll be great to have him back. And yeah, I mean, Wardlaw was quiet, so hopefully he did learn a thing or two. Maybe the breaks come for him at a good time, just, based on the fact that, sure, he's only played sort of 4 or 5 games, but when you have missed a lot of footy with soft tissue injuries, I think, it's important to give him that rest. So yeah, hopefully second half of the year he can really up that fitness and up his impact. Al Liptrot, I genuinely think we aren't too far away. Games in the players means more experience, more fitness, and in turn more composure. All those things are moving in the right direction. I reckon will surprise a lot of teams after the bye. Loving your positivity, Al, and I agree with most of that. I think, whilst I'm not sure that we're going to surprise heaps of teams after the bye, I think, yeah, it is all about getting games into these young players, and particularly getting games into them together. The likes of Sheasel, Wardlaw, Ford, obviously Taron Thomas, those young players, playing them together and getting them those reps is really important at the moment. So yeah, sorry if I didn't get to your comment on Twitter. I just, trying not to bog down the podcast with heaps and heaps of comments, just a couple of sort of pointers to get us through. Let's quickly whip through some news from the week. There's not a heap to go through because of the fact that we've got the bye next weekend anyway. So the VFL team beat Coburg. They won 95-65. Bit of an up and down game. Coburg's on the bottom of the ladder, so you would have liked to have beaten them by more. So a couple of good performances. I'll be honest, I haven't seen any of this game yet. I might catch up on it during the week, but it sounds as though Darcy Tucker was a standout. He had 37 touches, 7 marks and 2 goals. So it's going to be tough to get him back in, to be honest, given that LDU is due to come back in as well. But it's great to see him go back into the VFL and kind of prove him wrong, so to speak. A great game by him. I mean, we know Hall can get the ball. He had 37 touches and a goal as well. Perez and Lazaro got a bit of it, 25 and 23 respectively. Tristan Jerry came back in the VFL and had 15 touches, 27 hitouts, 6 clearances. So it looks as though he was good. It'll be interesting to see how many games in the VFL he gets before we try him again in the AFL and what that looks like, whether it means that Coleman Jones comes out or, what they try and do. Maybe Goldie comes out. I mean, Goldie's been so good. He was really good with his intercept marking today, actually, to be honest. In defence, I thought he was marking really well, particularly in the first quarter. So, yeah, that's a wait and watch. I don't imagine that, given it's a bye, I think that Cherry will play at least one more in the VFL. But potentially after that, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Cooper Harvey had kicked 2 goals for, so looked a bit lively. He's, I guess, the sort of player that maybe people want to get a go ahead of Spicer, but I mean, should we give it a go? I just don't know that Harvey's knocking down the door every single week. Cunnington and Howe, Dawson, Drury, they all played. Didn't have bad games by the looks of it. I'd like to see Drury stay there and get some reps, and maybe sort of late in the year, maybe get another run at it. But yeah, I mean, both sides, the VFL side has a bye next week as well, so we can all take stock and hopefully, recover and jump into the second half of the year. So I'm not going to spend too much time thinking about who might be ins and outs this early in the week, given it's, we've got 2 weeks to go. And the only other, not a lot happened in terms of North Melbourne news this week, just that Larkey, his re-signing was confirmed. So I talked about the reporting of it last week, and during the week it was made official that he's signed for another 5 years. So he had 1.5 left. So that takes him through the end of 2029. And I mean, he played like the sort of player that we'd want to be re-signing. He was great today. So it's fantastic that we've locked him up. And I mean, he's said all the right things about the club, which he has to. But yeah, great that he's shown the faith. And hopefully something like that might sway Ben McKay. But we'll just have to wait and see. It sounds like Larkey took a bit of a pay cut, or not a pay cut. He took a bit less money to stay, which is generally what has to be the case. Generally, to get a player out, you've got to pay a bit extra and you've got to see if it works. So great that Zurharr is committed. In terms of next week, I mean, it's a bye. So I guess as North Melbourne fans, we can just enjoy a stress-free week without the possibility of a loss. And hopefully the players enjoy that as well. I think, whilst, we might just get to watch some neutral footy, I guess. Because, no games, so we can all take a break. I think I will record a podcast for next week, do a bit of a mid-season review, and maybe talk about what we can expect from the second half of the year. So, look out for that around, next weekend or just after next weekend. Hopefully the boys have a good sort of week or so off and freshen up. It'd be interesting to see if there's going to be any news about Clarko in the next couple of weeks. I just wonder... if this might be the time that he's thinking about coming back. I've got no idea where he's at. Like, maybe we're a long while off that. It's kind of hard to tell. And just the other thing to, I guess, watch out for is, I think the rumours about players moving or being re-signed or that kind of stuff is going to ramp up around bye weekend, just because that's when a lot of the talks with managers and that happen. So it'll be interesting to see if any more contracts getting signed or there's more rumours coming out around players moving starting from now. I guess I'm not expecting to hear anything about McKay until after the season, but maybe there's some other things to fall into place, I guess. We'll just have to wait and see. So, I hope everyone's had a good week, has a good week. As I said, I'll record a podcast in about a week's time, do a bit of a mid-season review, so look out for that one. Just another reminder to subscribe to the podcast, give me a rating. Thank you to those people that have given me a rating and a review. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the support of everyone that's given the show support. It's been really overwhelming, so I really appreciate those people that listen in every week. And just, give me a follow on social media at NorthPod Show, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all of those usual channels. Have a great week, everyone, and as always, go North.